And we're waking up to being in officially phase 3 of the Omicron response after a further spike in cases that saw more than 6,000 cases in the community. Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, joins us now for more on this. Good morning.
Kia ora, good morning.
I just want to clarify some of the new rules, I guess, around phase 3. So I can work with somebody who has tested positive for COVID and I don't have to isolate if they're not a household contact. Yet next week, Monday, we're going to have people coming through the border from Australia who have taken a negative test and they are still going to have to isolate for 7 days.
Yes, that's exactly right. So under phase 3, as you say, the only people here who are required to isolate are household contacts. Of course, many other people who find out that they are contacts will choose to isolate to protect other members of their whānau, community and, of course, workmates. And, of course, we're asking them, and they should know so that they can take those precautions. So we've shifted quite quickly to phase 3. And the point here is that the plans for those coming across the border are in place. And at the moment, yes, the intention is that those people coming across the border, starting with the folk coming from Australia, will still need to self-isolate and do those rapid antigen tests. But, of course, that's something we are looking at because we are now in phase 3.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense, does it? Because they are not contacts anymore. So what is your advice to government on whether that should change?
Well, of course, we've given some initial advice pointing out exactly as you have said that actually the public health risk is actually higher here now in the community with what has become quite a rapidly growing Omicron outbreak compared with those people coming across the border. And then they will take that advice and get advice from right across government to see whether or not there's a plan to change that requirement. And I think that they will look at that very quickly.
When did you give that advice?
Just in the last couple of days, alongside everything else we've been doing, because our focus has been on really the arrangements to make that shift to phase 3.
Right, so when the plans were being made for phase 3, this wasn't anticipated, that there would be a discrepancy?
Well, remember that the dates were around that first day for opening up, the 27th, was set some weeks ago, and we didn't at that time know exactly how the Omicron outbreak would play out. As it transpires, here we are just a few days short of the 27th, and we are moving to phase 3. So now, yes, it's exactly the right time for us to reconsider and look at what the balance of public health risk is. So
you've given the advice in the last few days, so why not change it now that we know that it just doesn't make sense? Why can't that just be removed now?
Well, of course, our advice is just part of the consideration that the government goes through. So there is a range of other organisations and parts of government that are involved, Customs and Ministry for Business, Employment, Innovation. So they are also part of then providing fulsome advice that the government will consider. But as you heard from Minister Hipkins yesterday, they are giving it active consideration.
Right, so just to be clear though, your advice from a health perspective is that people coming across the border from Australia or from, say, March 13th, when New Zealand citizens can come from anywhere in the world, your advice is that there is no need for them to isolate if they have a negative test?
That's not our specific advice. What our advice is, of course, is that the risk that they might present of introducing COVID into the community is relatively lower than the risk that is out there already in the community. But that doesn't mean it's a zero risk. So then we have said we will come back with further advice about just what measures there should be in place, whether there's still a requirement for pre-departure testing, whether people who are symptomatic should or shouldn't go into isolation when they arrive, and so on. So, as I say, we've been very focused on the shift to phase 3, so that advice is still being prepared.
Not zero risk, but less risk than the people who are having, who aren't required to isolate here already. This is has a huge impact, though, on Air New Zealand, as we spoke to earlier, on our tourism companies. Why couldn't tourists come through from next week? What's the difference between them and New Zealand citizens coming through with a negative test? With a non-isolation period, sorry.
Sure. The government has laid out a path for reopening the border and reconnecting New Zealand, and very quickly over the next couple of weeks we see New Zealanders from right around the globe being able to return, not having, the big shift is not having to go into managed isolation and quarantine. They've put dates further out for further opening of the border, but again, as Minister Hipkins indicated yesterday, if things change, and they are changing very rapidly, they may look to bring those dates forward, but that's a decision for further down the track.
Okay, and just very quickly, today, if you are today you're a close contact of somebody if you live with somebody, but yesterday that was different under phase 2. If you're deemed a close contact yesterday, do you still have to isolate for 7 days, even though the rules have since changed?
No, you don't have to continue isolating, but again, just to emphasise, anyone who's a close contact not within the same household should find that out and take appropriate precautions to protect others. They should let their employer know so that they can put in place appropriate arrangements so that in case they do become a case, that they're not infecting others.
Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming on the show this morning.